Welcome back to another podcast episode where we help aspiring developers get jobs and junior developers grow. As all of you have asked, we are going to be doing Codesmith. So we're going to be doing a coding bootcamp review on Codesmith. I invited an alumni that recently graduated, fairly recently, but he's came on. He's going to share his experience, and we're going to wing this one. I have a brand new format, brand new questions. I want to hear in the comments or reach out to me. Let me know what you think. But let's go ahead and get started. Welcome.
Thanks. And thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start with, I think a lot of people want to know, like, when did you graduate? Do you currently have a position? Or are you still looking? And what was your previous industry before you switched to coding?
Yeah, so I guess to just really, really briefly go through it chronologically. Before I started coding, I was had about little under a decade of experience with kind of alternating between writing, translating, a little bit of video editing. I basically, after I finished college, I just moved to China and moved back to the US shortly before I started coding. So when I actually started coding, that was about 2 years ago, almost exactly 2 years ago. That's when I started teaching myself front-end development through free Codecamp and a few other resources. I initially tried to see if I could get a job that way. I was reaching out to employed developers. I interviewed for a couple of positions, but wasn't really getting anywhere. And that's when I started looking into boot camps. First, I wasn't sure if it was something that at that level, could I still get something out of a boot camp? And I discovered Codesmith. I was looking at a couple of other boot camps, but that's the one that kind of stood out to me. And I started attending Codesmith last February. So I did the program February to May of last year. And during that time, for reasons that should be pretty obvious, there was a shift from the on-site program to going remote. So that was also interesting, getting both of those experiences, because they're now completely remote. Although in the near future, I could definitely foresee possible shift back to, adding some on-site courses back in. So after I completed the program, I was given the opportunity to be hired as a full-time engineering fellow. And that was a 3-month contract. So from May to August of last year. And pretty shortly after that, I started my first full-time position. Well, technically, it was a contract position with Warner Music. Then actually about 4 weeks ago, I started my first, I guess you could say, officially full-time position at TrueCar. So that's where I'm working now.
Awesome. Okay. So do you feel like, I guess we'll get into that one later. Do you feel like you going back to kind of work at Codesmith, that really helped, boost your resume and just make you kind of shine with employers?
Because with Codesmith was, I guess you could say, my first real professional, just coding related experience. I'm thinking of before Codesmith. I had at a previous role at a startup in China, done a little bit of work with the website that the company launched. Most of the work that I was doing there was related to just kind of the overall UX, or I guess more a lot in the initial planning stages about just what the content was going to be about, who are we targeting, user paths and things like that. I wasn't really getting into doing coding or anything like that. Around the time that I started at Codesmith, I was also doing some freelance work But yeah, I mean, I guess like Codesmith, that would definitely be the most like professional thing that I had done in that regard. And I think also just having that extra 3 months, it really gave me an opportunity to go through the curriculum again. Because every day, every week, I was, meeting virtually with the residents that were there. And if they had any question about the curriculum, about an exercise, I had to be able to, answer it and give them a good explanation of what was happening, to the best of my ability. So for me, I thought like actually having that extra 3 months to go through the material again, I think that made me a lot more job ready.
Okay. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I hear a lot of similar stories with other fellows with other coding boot camps. So why'd you pick Codesmith? What caught your eye with it?
Well, I mean, I guess if I had to like pinpoint one thing, it would be the workshops that the free workshops that they had, have been holding for a while. The first one that I went to was taught by, or I guess given by Will Sentence, the co-founder, and it was called like How to Get Hired. It actually, I mean, it's a lot of really, really useful, really helpful content that I think helped me put into perspective, what the job search would be. I mean, of course, like a part of it is also to tell you, like, and if you go to Codesmith, we can give you an even bigger boost towards getting hired. But I think that definitely caught my interest. And I mean, this was at the time I was living in New York. That's where I am now. So I was at their location here in New York City, and I had the chance, like after the session, to talk to Will, to talk to some of the other people there, both like residents and instructors, and get a better feel for it. And then I also went to their like the other JavaScript, like the other sessions that they have there, which was, I think, also good for me to, I mean, I got a lot out of it. Just it taught me, I guess you could say, like, after going to a couple of sessions, coming out of it, I mean, I had a much better sense of, I mean, I was a lot better at talking about JavaScript, about how it worked. Technical communication is something that, like, and when I eventually went to through the Codesmith program, something that's like emphasized throughout the process. So, I mean, that's something that started getting reinforced as I was going through those sessions. And
you mean the sessions before or during the program?
Oh, before the program.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay, so it sounds like they put a lot of kind of events and content out there to like really give you confidence in what they were doing. Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah, and the JavaScript sessions, what they call like the hard parts. It's something that what I liked about it is that I mean, if you wanted to attend the program, you did need to go to a few hard part sessions, and leading up to the eventual interview that you had, there's no obligation to attend Codesmith because they're free, and while they do have some information about Codesmith in them in the beginning, it's something that you can just go and just like boost your knowledge of JavaScript. So, I mean, that's something that I appreciated, that I was actually getting a lot of really useful knowledge out of those sessions. Okay. So that did shape my perception of Codesmith and what I thought I would be able to get out of it.
Okay. I think that makes a lot of sense. They've done a really good job. Because I've even talked to another coding bootcamp, and I invited their career success to come on and give resume tips. I'm like, show what you have to offer people in there. I remember the director saying, I really don't want to do that because, that's part of the program. that's behind a paywall, and I think students should have to pay for that. And that's fine. That's a business mindset, but also I think if more coding bootcamps were willing to be more transparent with this advice, like a lot of people go to a coding bootcamp because they trust, what you can do for them, but they're not going to be able to trust that when they just have this paywall of reviews. And, it's really hard to trust like top lists and stuff like that. So, I mean, kudos to Codesmith for doing that. I think they're doing that well. Just real quick, what was your second choice if you didn't go to Codesmith?
I think my second choice at the time was, I believe it was Full Stack Academy.
Okay.
I mean, part of it was just based off my own research, and I know that actually I think a couple of people who went to who are my cohort were also looking at Full Stack Academy. I remember also hearing about their application process. Also seemed like it was fairly rigorous too, and that was at the time something that I was looking for was just already having a bit of a foundation in web development. So because at the time that I started looking at boot camps, that was about 9 months after I started really self-teaching and working on every single day. So at the time, one of my fears was am I at the point where I'm not at the point where I can, land a professional job, but too far ahead to really get a lot out of a boot camp, except for maybe the last couple of weeks. So when I was looking at boot camps, I was really particular. I was, asking is this going to be challenging to someone who already knows the basics, or are you going to spend a long time on it? So I was glancing at the curriculums of some boot camps, and it looked like for the first month or so, they were covering a lot of really basic stuff that I had already covered on my own. But somewhere Full Stack Academy or Codesmith seemed like it had a bit more of a challenging curriculum, and kind of the fact that Codesmith was really the second half of the curriculum is project based. That was something that grabbed my eye too.
Okay. I think that makes a lot of sense. When you did get accepted and you went into the program, what did you learn? And more specifically, what did you learn that you think made you competitive in the job market?
Yeah. So, I was just kind of saying, the way that the curriculum is made up, how the second half is project based and the first half is very much lecture based. Kind of a mix of lectures and pair programming, along with a couple of small projects. So I think if I had to compare the two, I actually think I got the most out of the first half of the program, just in terms of the quantity of what I learned. And that's because really for 2 days at a time, you're just getting a fire hose of information about a certain topic, whether it's data structures or Node or React or Redux. So what that did for me, I think, was it really helped fill in a lot of the gaps in my front end knowledge, particularly in terms of React and especially Redux, because I had tried teaching myself Redux a few times on my own and was never able to fully grasp it. But then when I did it at Codesmith, part of it was also my own preparation. I guess I watched a talk about it before the actual before we had the actual lecture, and when we were doing our pair programming project, my partner and I, we just read through the documentation for about an hour or so, just to make sure we knew that what we were doing. So yeah, filling in those gaps in my front end knowledge. And also I had never delved into any kind of back end programming before. So that was something that that I wanted to learn. So, we covered Node and then Express and databases, both relational and non-relational. So Postgres and MongoDB, basically. And yeah, I felt like I was a lot more well-rounded. When I was applying for jobs after that, I still focused on jobs that were like more front end oriented, but I felt more confident applying for a full stack position. The reason why I went for front end oriented is because I had that self-taught experience before Codesmith. So I knew that it was something that, like, if I was like put on the spot to say like do a front end exercise or a back end exercise, I would definitely do much better with the front end exercise. So, but having that back end experience at Codesmith is something that, like, even, now when I'm, if I'm working on like personal projects, it means that I'm like, fully confident, building out like a full stack app, or, at my current job also, I do mostly front end work, but they're also very open to, having like developers like, switch around and be flexible about the parts of the stack that they work on. So I'll have the opportunity to do some back end work if I want to.
Okay, really cool. So you went in with a little bit more front end experience, and you were talking about that kind of like leaning on UX and talking about the content, which I think is awesome. A lot of people don't, like, a lot of coding boot camps don't even supplement that. So you going into it, and then like Codesmith, do you feel like it leans a little bit more on the back end with the knowledge it teaches?
I feel like it is kind of, I guess you could say like half and half in terms of the time that they spend, but at Codesmith, it's pretty clear from the fact that most of their lectures and their like prep courses are all on JavaScript. You don't really need to know like really any CSS to get in there, at least like when I was applying. That wasn't really emphasized. Although that was something that like during, we had a couple of like, exercises to get through before actually starting the program. And there they had some exercises like, cloning a website, using like, HTML and CSS to do that. But so I guess like if you kind of went in without any kind of front end knowledge, it might make more sense to go for, say, like a position that had a much bigger emphasis on Node, where we were just using, full on JavaScript in the back end, not really dealing with any kind of UI. But they do focus on, React and Redux for the front end. So I guess it is kind of maybe around half and half. Okay. And then the project-based, that second half of the curriculum, that is probably where you can kind of like go your own path. And if you're more interested in front-end development, you can go in that direction, or go for like a full-on like back-end based project.
Okay. All right. That's really good knowledge to know. So I think I appreciate you sharing that. How big was your cohort?
Well, I guess at what time? Because so like I was saying, really, like, it was almost exactly at the middle of our cohort's like period when everything kind of shut down in the US and we went remote. So when we started, there were about 30 of us, and I think that's kind of like about the size of a cohort, at least like for when I was starting, and the next couple of cohorts, maybe a little over 30. But for us, it was 30 people. We did have a few people that either just dropped out of the program or deferred to a later cohort. And actually, I saw a couple of them again as fellows. But by the time like the dust settled after the transition to remote, we had 20 people.
Okay.
Yeah. But generally speaking, the size of a cohort, at least like I would say my experience looking at the cohort before me and as a fellow, tends to be around 30. I know that Codesmith started with definitely with smaller cohorts, closer to like maybe 10 people, but they've been growing.
How many instructors did you have for those 30 people?
Let me think. So we had, there was there's always a lead technical instructor, lead technical mentor. And recently they also, I know that they introduced a kind of like an assistant position to that. So what we call like the LTM, I mean, they're, well, I was going to say like the lead instructor, but that's pretty obvious from the name. But they are full-time for kind of like indefinitely at the program, and kind of supplementing them. Then you have your fellows. So I'm trying to remember offhand how many we had. I believe it was about maybe about 5 or so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We kind of had some people rotating, but it could be about like 5 or 6 roughly. Although they over time, like as the cohorts grow, they might slightly expand the number of fellows that they have. But like roughly around that scale. And the way that it worked was usually the main lectures, introducing each unit, like introducing, what is a database or something like that, was taught by either the LTM or also I believe the position was another head instructor. It was the head of curriculum at the time, but so there were 2 kind of real like full-time instructors who were delivering all of the main lectures, and the fellows, while I guess they are working like 8 hours a day, it's they're either hired for like 3 or 6 months at a time usually. So that's why I was like differentiating with the full-time
Gotcha.
Lead technical mentors. And the fellows would supplement in with kind of like supplementary lessons, or looks at the different approaches for the projects like that or our assignments.
Okay. So did you feel like you were pretty well supported going through the curriculum with the fellows and the instructors, or did you have any hiccups?
Yeah, well, I guess one thing that is, I don't know if it's common at other boot camps, but something that's very particular to Codesmith is the way that they approach, helping out if you're running into any issues. I mean, if it's something like, I can't, I don't know how to like use Git or NPM. I mean, look, I'm just starting out. Something like that. I mean, you'll get help. You'll get someone to walk you through that. But for some, I guess kind of for a lot of the different issues that you'll face, which would just be, I'm like, not sure. Trying to think of an example, but I was going to say, like, I'm not sure how to do this. That's really vague. But a lot of the issues that basically come down to where the solution is just like looking through documentation or doing some Googling. If you're running into one of those issues, the fellows or instructors will first encourage you to really say, like, first, wait until you're stuck on it for like half an hour or so. Start like doing a lot of research, trying to find the solution on your own, and then reach out to us for help. And it kind of follow the Stack Overflow model of asking for help, where you have a basic format of like, what's the issue? What are you expecting to see? What are you actually, getting back? What are you actually seeing? And what steps have you already taken to resolve the problem? And then when we were on site, a fellow would come over and help you. Now it's, all done like, send it on the Slack channel, and then a fellow will just like hop in with you on video. So I'd say for things like that, I felt like that, and that general process is, I think, like Googling is a really important skill for any engineer. So yes, I mean, that was really helpful. And maybe it's not so much a Codesmith thing, but kind of like a bootcamp thing where, because at least from my own experience and from what I've heard, I mean, the fellows tend to be people who, have like just finished the program and then, were brought on to that like slightly, higher position. And an advantage is that they have familiarity with the curriculum, like having worked through it. But I guess like, I don't know if it's an issue that like I ran into a lot, but just the fact that like you're in many cases asking for help from someone who has just like a little bit more experience than you do. It does put a lot more responsibility on you to find the solution. But I mean, kind of like understandably can come with some drawbacks.
Yeah.
I guess like compared to say if someone with a couple of years of experience who might be able to give you a slightly different explanation of how to approach something.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable summary of just the experience with fellows as well. And that's a tricky thing too, because, I get a lot of feedback. I get a lot of people sharing their concerns with their experience at a coding bootcamp. And when someone starts out with, well, like they made me look up the answer on my own, sometimes it takes a little bit of digging. Like, did the instructor, are they too overworked to handle the issue? Are they too lazy to handle the issue? Did they not really care about their students, or are they trying to encourage developers to learn on their own? And that, that's a big skill coding boot camps are trying to really instill in developers. And that's a tricky thing to slowly transition from, holding their hand into like really trying to pull away as far as you can so they could learn this on their own. That's a tricky thing with a lot of coding boot camps. And yeah, the pros and cons of fellows, usually for the most part, most people have issues with the instruction or the help more so with the fellows versus the instructors for the same reasons. Some fellows will really go out of their way to supplement like every night before their first cohort starts. And you can really tell a difference in the knowledge of, one fellow over another. And, they all have different personalities. So I think what you said was very reasonable. But what was your time commitment like?
Yeah. Also, let's see. It was probably easier to calculate when I was actually on site because, I mean, when the program started, I would I'm about roughly 20 minutes away from from the actual Codesmith building, or the floor of the building where Codesmith was located. So I would usually get there. Let's see, I guess maybe around 8:00. It has been a year or so, but I think we started around 9:00 every day, and then I would be there in the building until it really depends. But yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be uncommon for me to stay until 8 or 9 or later at night. Just and yeah, I mean, spend the bigger chunk of my day there. Yeah, and I honestly, maybe it's a bit of a tangent, but I definitely preferred being on site as opposed to doing it remotely, because there's the fact that once you're actually there, inside the building, you have that kind of, it's a lot of added motivation to have so many other people around you doing the same thing, making the same commitment. And that also made it easier to sync a lot of time, because, if I wanted to it would be easy to take a break and maybe walk around for a few minutes. But then, you're still rooted back at that location. If you're doing it remotely, it does take a lot more willpower. Where I basically, once we went remote, I kind of, tried to spend the same amount of time working on it. But there's also the fact that you're at home on your computer, and if you want, you could just go and take a nap.
Yeah. The number of times when I'm working on my business, I walk past my bedroom, it's 12, it's midnight and I still have stuff to do, man. I want to sleep. I just want to hop on that bed. It's easy.
And just even now that I'm working remotely, just the thing that keeps me motivated to like stay in my seat is the fact that like, if I walk away for too long, like on Slack, I'll just go idle and then my coworkers will see that.
Yeah. Little tip, don't do this, but you can change the idle time on Slack, can't you?
But I think, another slight tangent, but the computer that I use for work, I saw and it looks like I am unable to adjust the amount of time before it actually, like the screensaver goes on. It's set to 5 minutes. Yeah.
Okay. So, but yeah, don't do that. Even if your company lets you guys, don't take my advice. So a lot of people they ask, what do you come out with what do you come out with a coding bootcamp? Like a lot of people want to come out with portfolios and portfolio projects, and some coding bootcamps don't really, they kind of just teach and expect you to build that portfolio on your own. But I'm going to ask with Codesmith, what portfolio project did you end up with when you came out of the coding bootcamp that you were most proud of?
Yeah, so I guess I haven't really gone into the project aspect of the curriculum. And first, just like a really quick overview of how that is. I mean, you will have like a very like small project or two during the first half, creating a Chrome extension. That was one thing that we did as we were starting out, and that was a lot of fun, just like spending the night on. But it's really like the second half when you have like a solo project, one that you're doing all on your own, and then you have a couple of small group projects, and then finally it's really what like all those projects are leading up to is what we call the production project. So this is a project that you work on with a group. You're placed with a group, and you have about 6 weeks to work on it. And it is basically, it's always some kind of developer tool. So it's, and as you, it's very like open-ended what it's about. Usually it tends to be focusing on a technology that was not covered in the curriculum. So you have like, once you are assigned to a group, you have about a week for like, what at Codesmith we called ideation. And I mean, just as an example, like what my group did, and this production project, this would definitely be what I came out of Codesmith, thinking that like, it was a project that I was actually able to talk about in interviews. We called it TorchQL, and it is, I guess I could say the present tense because the code is still out there. Basically a tool revolving around like GraphQL, which case, anyone watching this isn't familiar with it, is kind of like an alternative to the RESTful pattern for creating APIs, where you're just calling out to a single endpoint, and it gives you a ton of advantages, like letting you just say this is exactly the shape of the data that I want. So
I love GraphQL.
But basically, I've used it at both of my positions, interestingly enough, and it was actually something that like kind of stood out when I was interviewing for my role at Warner, since I had worked on that project.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So yeah, and I don't have to go like too in detail about like the project, but maybe if someone like wants to know like what's the kind of project that they might come out with. So like a very quick summary is like, you can, if you already have a database set up, let's say you have like a MySQL or Postgres database, already with its like tables and relationships set up in that, you could enter the endpoint for your database into the application, and then it would just spit out a sample schema, a GraphQL schema that you could use to basically just like implement a GraphQL server like right away and start querying it. So yeah, you would have like the schema, the basic resolvers that you could use to do like basic CRUD operations. But yeah, so basically just a way to take like just a database and then turn it into like a GraphQL server. So that was what my what my group did. You just like the kinds of things that other groups did. Like you have some groups that were like tools for like saying monitoring Kubernetes clusters, for visualization of like React State, a lot of like really interesting projects. And I think one recommendation that I would have for anyone going through the program when they got to the production project stage is you do have a choice to either create a project from scratch or to iterate on a past project that like one or more groups had worked on. I mean, when I was there were projects that like a few groups had like already iterated on. And so you're taking a project that's already established and just like building it up, improving it, making it more performant, adding new features. I and my group, we chose to build one from scratch. My recommendation would be to not do that and iterate on it. And I guess there's no wrong decision, but I think in terms of what might look better on your resume in interviews and what might kind of like help prepare you for the kind of work you'll be doing as like, on the job. I think like iterating on a project might be the better way to go about that. Of course, if you have like a really strong idea of what you want to do, by all means, like go and create it. But I do like that we had those options when we were at Codesmith. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for going into detail and giving people a few ideas of what they might be building, because that's a big question, and I'd rather hear that from a student versus one of their advertisements. I would trust that a little bit more. So that was good. So when you actually graduated, how well did you feel like you were prepared for a full-time developer position?
I mean, at that time, I guess I wasn't really thinking in terms of like, am I prepared? It's just like, how badly do I want it? But like kind of in retrospect, like especially after like my having like that contractor role at Warner and what I'm doing now at TrueCar, and kind of like looking back at where I was. I mean, I think I can definitely say that the extra 3 months definitely helped me. And if I had started if I did not take on that job as a fellow after graduating, I would probably be I would have probably been in the interview process for a while. And I mean, one thing that I think like anyone finishing Codesmith, I mean, I guess anyone getting to the interview process, if they're kind of a new-ish developer, something that they'll probably find out is that the first batch of interviews that you do, unless you get pretty lucky, they are really there to help you prepare for your next interviews. And yeah, as I went through, I was actually, I was interviewing during the second half of the fellowship. So I guess for about a month and a half. And it was right about at the end that I got the offer for contracting with Warner, and through that process. So I guess, yeah, by that time I had just about an extra month and a half of experience. And at that time I felt, I guess kind of like I was saying, I leaned more towards front end jobs. And even kind of this last batch of interviews where I ended up at my current role at TrueCar, did have one or two interviews that were one that was a full stack role, but I was getting a lot of questions about working with MySQL and very database specific ones. And I definitely felt like pretty weak in that regard. I would definitely say that if you expect to go to Codesmith, just go through the curriculum, and then get a job. I think one thing that you really need to add to that is a lot of like supplementing it on your own with learning, and even say like when I was going through the Redux unit, so that's one that like stands out to me. I tried to reinforce that by like building a small project, just like based on the knowledge that I had like gotten out of it. It wasn't like, it was something I just like did like that night, basically just to be able to like implement Redux in like a really tiny app. Or like after the our SQL section, I would like go through our like, you know, SQL exercise again and try building a couple of apps with like a database. It's something that you do have to practice a lot in addition to what you actually do in, you know, the actual like Codesmith hours, I guess. So how prepared you are, like when you come out of the program, it really, it sounds really cliche, but it really comes down to like how much effort you put into it. And I mean, I kind of like know that some people, you know, are really, really relieved and really happy that they can get into the program because, you know, they spend a lot of time going to the hard part sessions and practicing on like CSX, which is Codesmith's platform with a lot of different JavaScript exercises. And, you know, a lot of time preparing for the interview, and they finally got in. And some people might think that like, oh, this is it. I'm there. I just need to just like ride this wave, just go through the program, and then I'll be able to get a job at the end. But you really have to keep putting in a lot of effort. And I mean, it's not just like a Codesmith thing, but just, you know, if you really want to be proficient at anything, I guess. But I think that might be like a danger of going to like a boot camp, and especially one like Codesmith that's promising, or I don't want to say like promising, but can talk about how a lot of their graduates, you know, go on to get these really great positions. Just like keep in mind, if that's the road that you're going down, that the people that got these positions were definitely the program like Codesmith helped them, and in addition, they were also very like hardworking and motivated people. So, and that's not something I'm saying to like try to gatekeep, but I think like anyone, if they get to the point where they're able to get into Codesmith, they definitely possess that drive. So you just need to keep like pushing yourself, really.
And yeah, so, you know, you have every coding bootcamp that advertises, you know, we push people, our graduates, into big FANG companies. And, you know, that's really the select few, to be honest. And a lot of, it sounds like Codesmith has a higher barrier to entry, which they weed out a lot of people that probably aren't going to be highly motivated and hardworking. But, you know, it's still, I like that you gave kind of a realistic experience of, well, you know, this isn't everyone. You're still, you know, realistically going to struggle through the interview process, and you're probably going to have to supplement. And, you know, what you're doing there is you're setting them up for success. For someone that just thinks like Codesmith is going to give them an A to B solution where they're going to get a job right as they graduate and they just do the minimum required, like that's not setting someone up for success. So I like that you were very real about that. And I think people are going to appreciate that. So what kind of support did they give you after you graduated? Thinking like career services, resume help, interview help, stuff like that.
Yeah. So well, I guess like I said, I got the my contracting role basically about like a week after I finished the fellowship. So I didn't really wasn't really using their kind of like career services that much, but I know that they there is a Slack channel for alums, and they do have weekly check-ins. And I know recently something that they've started doing is a couple of past like Codesmith graduates who are now like working in the field are able to, you know, like just give some of their time to have like, sessions with people who are still looking for a role, which is something that I think is really helpful. And I think it's, I don't know how recently, but I know it's something that was only became like a thing really once I was actually working. Because one kind of like, I guess one reason that I didn't really like fall back on using the Codesmith, like the kind of like career support or services, like as I was a fellow and like applying for jobs, is that I guess, yeah, I should also mention that at Codesmith, during the second half, as you're working on projects, there is what we call like the hiring portion, which is, so it's like focusing on aspects of the hiring process, like coming up with a resume, along with some practice for like the technical interviews, or just, a lot of like interview practice, even some like an introduction to like system design. Out of that, I think personally, the resume was definitely something that I really that I got out of that. I mean, I left it, the program, with a much better resume. I looked back at the resume that I had before Codesmith, and it looked like a child had written it. So I can definitely say that just by following kind of like their formula, that you will end up with a resume that is, well, at the very least, definitely has a lot of words. But no, there's I don't want to like, I guess like give away the secret sauce, but I mean, just to give like a general overview, they really have you break down like what are the different technologies that you've worked with in, if you are new to coding, okay, well, what about during the different projects that you've worked on? If you don't have any kind of like prior experience or prior like coding experience, on your resume, you might put for like open source experience or like project experience, these different projects that you've worked on. And for each kind of like project, you break down, okay, well, like what's something that I did? How did I do it? And why was it important for me to do that? And that's like a bullet point. So kind of like the Codesmith strategy is to put all of these like very, very technical bullet points in your resume, not to kind of like impress someone by saying like, oh, they know about like GraphQL, or they know what like concurrency is, but it's more like to show your general like understanding, like they're able to do these things, and they also know like why it's useful, for like, I don't know, like a performance improvement or something like that. And also you might mention, if you have like prior experience that's like technical adjacent, you might kind of mention some of that, or, if there's like leadership experience, they do spend like time just like, working with you and making sure that they just like draw out anything that's like, that can go on the resume to get in there. So I think that was for me, like the high point of the hiring program, just being able to get like a resume that I was like pretty proud of. I'd say the rest of it for me, and again, it definitely varies from person to person. Like I said, I had almost a decade of experience, not like coding, but just having jobs, interviewing for different jobs. So I feel like for me, there were parts of that, the hiring portion, where it felt pretty general. And I didn't feel like I came out of it like especially more prepared for the interview. I feel like once I actually got into the interviewing on my own, that's where I really gained a lot of the skills that helped later on in other interviews. Because I would say if there's one thing that kind of like irked me a little bit, was just that I'd heard some other people say that for them, the hiring portion, that was like worth the cost of attending Codesmith. that's something that I don't exactly agree with. Although, yeah, there is that like slight caveat that if you're someone, say, like, who is like fresh out of college and you don't have like a ton of like past work experience, you might get a lot more out of that hiring program. But if you're someone who has like who's worked a couple of different jobs but not necessarily like tech related, results may vary.
Okay, that's good advice. By the way, how many people from your cohort finished the actual program?
So basically all of the 20 people who, this was like halfway through the program. So those 10 people had either dropped out or deferred. And
okay, go ahead.
The 20 people who remained all finished the program.
Okay, so basically 10 people from start to finish, 10 people dropped out of the 30?
Yeah, I mean, a few of them eventually finished, and I think about, maybe about 2 of them end up going to another cohort, as far as I know, and finished in a later cohort. But yeah.
Okay. How many people in your cohort got a job within? Should we do like within 3 months?
Well, it's just to start narrowing it down. So now It's been a little under a year. Well, I guess it's been about, because we finished in last May, so I guess it's been about like 10 months. Right now, I'd say about half of the cohort is now employed. Within 3 months, kind of off.
Actually, that's good. No. That's actually good information. I'm not going to do within 3 months.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have like exact numbers. I'd say you had a couple of people that initially got jobs shortly after, and then it kind of like trickled in after that. Okay.
That's really good information. So about 10 months, about half the cohort has gotten a position already. And you're talking about like developer positions?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I know that one graduate I know has one that is a like a technical writing position, and that's the only like non like developer position that I'm aware of. And also I think for the other cohorts, kind of like the adjacent cohorts, like the one before us and the one after us, I think they've been a little bit better in terms of the rates of finding jobs.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Yeah, that context is also important. It feels like you've definitely stayed in touch with Codesmith, and you're able to kind of give these little stats even outside your cohort, which is pretty cool to hear. So we talked a lot about what they did, what you liked about it. What do you think they could do better?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually something that I've like spent a lot of time like thinking about, just in terms of like, because I mean, one thing that something that I've kind of had like been like mulling over for a while is to see if like sometime in the future, if I could create like resources that would help other developers who like me were trying to teach themselves like on their own. So I've kind of like been thinking of possible approaches and like comparing it to how Codesmith did it and like what could I improve upon. I mean, I think so. Overall, I mean, I think that the way that Codesmith like split it up from having something that's very much like based on just like immersing you in all of this knowledge about like both front end and back end technologies in kind of like a nonstop like way, and then transitioning from that to having you implement that knowledge in projects. I think like overall is a really good strategy, and I know like myself that just working on actual projects is probably like the best way of really just reinforcing what you've learned, because it's something that like I continue doing just on my own as I'm learning this. So I'm trying to think of like ways that this could be improved, and then this might be a little bit more subjective, but like I mentioned, I did like about half of the program on site, half of it remote. And I mean, for me, it could also be like the way that I prefer to learn, but I definitely preferred being on site. I think one kind of like sticking point that I know some of us had, one reason why like some people dropped out was because the price of like tuition was essentially the same if we were on site or if we were doing remotely. We did get a remote like stipend, which was like basically a little bit of our tuition back to set up our like kind of workspaces basically. So yeah, I mean that was something that like bothered a lot of us, and I mean I feel like, I guess if you're going into it like fully remote, it would definitely be a different experience than doing like half and half for our cohort. It definitely had like a pretty big impact on morale overall. So yeah, I guess like just that probably is like just helpful to know just for context of like my experience doing it remotely. It was like with the cohort who had just been through this transition. Although, I mean, like most of us, we were still like, making the effort to work through it and get the most out of the remote experience. Although, I mean, to be honest, there was like a point in time where I was wondering, like, is it still worth like, sticking with the program because this wasn't what I had signed up for. I eventually decided to stick with it to keep working remotely. And while I felt that kind of like a lot of what we were doing, like, remotely, the lectures and say like approaches to like algorithms, like we had a hack hour every morning, which was like for an hour, we would all work on the same algorithm, like separately, but we would all be either in the same Zoom room or the same physical room if we're on site, and the approaches. So there definitely was like a big transition, like the way that those lectures were given, where, it would be in a Zoom room and someone on their iPad drawing the solutions. So, I mean, I think as I became like a fellow and was giving those same lectures, we definitely like, when we were giving those lectures again, definitely found like a way to work around it and still try to like, convey the knowledge in the same way. And this is more just like a general, just a remote thing, a remote versus on-site thing. But I think it might be helpful if anyone is, I don't know, let's say like Codesmith goes back to, offering like an on-site portion and you're in the area and you're deciding what I want to like go on site or go remote. So yeah, that would be kind of like in terms of the general format, like some of my thoughts, but I guess one thing, yeah, I mean, I don't know if you were mentioning earlier about that you had a little bit of difficulty finding other like Codesmith graduates on LinkedIn, and it's because of the fact that and your hunch was right, like kind of at Codesmith, like when we're like crafting our LinkedIn profiles, like a general practice is not to list like Codesmith under education, and that's something that I know, like I guess like pretty much like all boot camps that you'll just do, or I mean, I don't know if it's something that they'll tell you to do, but people just do it anyway. And kind of the general practice at Codesmith is I mean, I can like, if you go through the program, you'll be able to look at someone else's like LinkedIn profile and tell, okay, this is like, they went to Codesmith, because usually they'll have it's like their production project that will be under their experience, along with like an open source section. And and I mean, kind of like the reasoning behind doing that is that, from what I remember of like what we were told when we were there, is that if you go into an interview and telling someone like I went to a boot camp, they'll have like a certain perception of you. But if you are instead not saying like I went to a boot camp, but talking about a project that you were working on with some other developers, which is your production project, and the different like technical challenges that you faced there, and you're kind of like talking about your technical narrative from a different angle, then that could, that the interviewer would view you a bit differently. And I can definitely agree that, I mean, I guess like, companies, interviewers might have some biases against people who went to boot camps. Although it's something that, I mean, I've like kind of like reflected on to like the kind of the best way to like present yourself. Because I know that, and I'm not saying that like this is that like the way that Codesmith encourages you to do it. I'm not saying that way is dishonest, but I've read online a lot of people seeing the way that like people who went to Codesmith apply for, say they apply for a job, and the way that they talk about the production project might come across as a little bit sketchy, and kind of like give some employers like a bad taste in their mouth, just, regarding Codesmith, might give them a bad impression. So this is something that like is, I guess, like compounded by what the actual graduates do once they, go on with that kind of resume. But so, I mean, I don't know if I like fully agree with that way of presenting yourself, even though it's kind of like, I mean, it's kind of like, well, what I did, I had the fellowship that I could fall back on and talk about that. So it wasn't like, always like, necessary to mention that like I went to this program at Codesmith. I was able to talk about like, here's some actual like professional coding experience that I had. So I think I definitely had a big advantage just being able to talk about my, the fellowship like on my resume and as like actual experience. But I mean, I do know actually one of my friends from my cohort who actually like just got a job at like a pretty well-known company was like really upfront about saying like, yeah, I mean, I went to Codesmith as a student, and then I was a fellow there, and yeah, I mean, I think like I'm a really good fit for this position, and then she got it. So,
okay, so this is a really good topic, and this is definitely the last thing I want to talk about. I'm glad you brought it up. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I want to share my thoughts, and I want to hear your opinion on this. So you haven't seen my videos where I've talked about this topic at all, right?
Like specifically about Codesmith?
Specifically about like how to present yourself on LinkedIn. Should you put it under education? Yeah, I think you only...
No, I haven't seen this.
Okay, cool. Perfect. So there is... there's this, I don't know if it's a rumor, I don't know if it's an advertisement from Codesmith, but a lot of people have approached me and mentioned that Codesmith claims that they produce mid-level to senior level software engineers. And this is a big thing. Have you ever seen an advertisement like that before?
Yeah, I'm trying to, and I guess I want to like phrase it very carefully. I'm trying to think of like exactly how it was. I think, the way that I might have heard it is that people come out of Codesmith getting like mid to senior level positions. So, and gotcha. You can kind of see there's a difference mid to I definitely wouldn't, if you went into Codesmith without any prior engineering experience, you definitely would not come out as a senior engineer.
And I agree. Yeah. I completely agree. Now, I'm sure they've talked to an attorney about how to word that. But as you can see sometimes things like that are very misleading because it's how they're perceived. They're just covering their butts legally with how they portray it. And we can get into data and everything of outcomes. But ultimately, so it sounds like Codesmith is trying to make you seem like you're not just a coding bootcamp graduate, like you're a software engineer with real professional experience. And now, to an extent, I encourage a lot of people to sell themselves in kind of that way. For example, I don't like people calling themselves junior software engineers. Just call yourself a software engineer.
Right.
You don't need to be stuck just applying to junior positions. And I think a lot of people undervalue what they can really do when they come out of a coding bootcamp. So it's important to instill confidence in the software engineers. Now, I think you kind of shared your gut feeling about some of this, and you say what you were encouraged to do. And then you also seem to be very perceptive of how that's perceived and how that can be perceived by hiring managers. I can tell you for certain, a lot of hiring managers have noticed this. It's becoming a new practice. This isn't just Codesmith anymore, and they're not happy about it. They feel like a lot of prospects, software engineers are lying to them. And so that conversation often comes up in the interview, and it does put a sour taste in their mouth. And so I get why Codesmith does it. They want their software engineers to be hired. Now, putting yourself as a software engineer because you worked on this group project, when a lot of coding boot camps will have a group project, you can call it a production project, whatever you want to phrase it. Yeah. Most capstone projects go online. They're production projects. They're advertised on their videos on Facebook, and we did this at Full Stack Academy. But there's a big difference, and that's even fine if you don't want to list Codesmith as education. But when you put yourself working as a software engineer at a company and you were just a student, I'm not talking about fellow. I think fellow is a little bit different. But when you were just a student, what that ends up doing is it allows Codesmith to get away with advertising the types of students that come out, the types of positions that they gain. There's some other data that they're leaving out with that, but it's not super hard to trick some employers into thinking that you have previous professional experience. And usually a lot of developers will come in and they'll kind of trick a hiring manager into thinking, oh, well, they had 6 months of experience. It sounds like it didn't work out. So this is their second position. They got the lay of the land a little bit. And then almost always their experience of a coding bootcamp student comes out. And so what this does is it teaches hiring managers to be more skeptical of junior software engineers. It makes companies not want to hire junior software engineers. So then you have software engineers or aspiring software engineers that complain, well, why am I doing all these difficult whiteboard interviews? I'm not going to be tackling these challenges. A lot of the industry is I completely understand it. Hiring managers are losing trust for what junior engineers actually know. And so they really want to weed people out. And they might weed out a good couple software engineers, but it's better to hire or it's better to weed out a potential good software engineer than hire a bad one and not budget for the massive amount of ramp up time that you just didn't expect. So I get why Codesmith does it. I do think it's very deceptive. I would be careful and encourage people to think twice before they follow that advice, because some people are skeptical of a coding bootcamp. In fact, my first position, my hiring manager did not trust coding bootcamp graduates whatsoever. And I had to show him that I wasn't that previous applicant that showed him that, he couldn't trust coding bootcamp graduates. So it's a really tricky thing. And I don't recommend software engineers starting out with a lie. I think it'll end badly. You'll lose a potential recommendation letter. A lot of people in the software engineering industry talk. A lot of hiring managers, CTO, there's tons of CTO. Well, there's a few really popular CTO groups, and a lot of hiring managers talk. This all gets around, and very often just when you make a name, when you just flat out lie and make a name for yourself in the software engineering industry in that way, it's just kind of a chance that you're taking. So I know I'm kind of venting right now, but this is really how I feel about what Codesmith is doing. I'm just curious because I know we have about 5 minutes, but any thoughts to that?
Yeah, no, and a lot of the like thoughts that you were just voicing, and it's really similar thoughts have gone like through my head too. And I should definitely add that like it's not like every student, every graduate coming out of Codesmith is approaching the interview like that. I know that there have been, a lot who like, if they were like confronted, like, was this like a boot camp? They've gone, they said like, oh yeah, it was, and still gotten the job, or been really upfront. Like, when I was in interviews, I would be very clear. It was like, as I think the way that I initially presented it, like in my LinkedIn profile, might have made it sound like a company, but if they said like, oh, was this a company? I was very clear, like, no, this was just a project that I was working on with some other engineers. But also I do know that, I was talking to another graduate who was saying that someone who like worked on their production project was asking them like, would you be okay, like, being a reference for me, like for the production project? And they like initially were like, oh yeah, that's fine. And then they found out that the person who asked them to be a reference was like, had told the company that they were interviewing with that this was like a startup that they were with that was initially, thinking about like pursuing funding, but decided not to. And it was kind of like creating this whole story around that. And that's something that like I feel really uncomfortable about. And I think one reason why like these things like kind of like come out in the interview could be just the fact that, with going to a coding bootcamp, if say, you're in a situation that's anything like what I was doing, like right before I started Codesmith, I quit my job. So I had like, no income, and I paid like the full tuition. And I knew that like when I finished the program, say if I hadn't done the fellowship, I, would need to get hired like as soon as possible to like start making some kind of income again. So a lot of people in that situation, depending on like what their financial situation is, might start getting a little bit desperate. And I don't know if that's like what sometimes like fuels that kind of like way of presenting yourself, but it's something that I definitely don't feel comfortable about. And I know like, yeah, when people go like about like presenting themselves in interviews in like a really sketchy way, it's not always the way that like Codesmith is recommending it. Although, I don't know if they're doing this now, but I guess something that might have helped is just like to kind of explicitly say like, do not do this. We were kind of told like, to always be like factual in our interviews, but I, had heard things from say like fellows who were there by saying it's like what we were doing was kind of like we had like 3 years of like functional experience, that we could put it like that, which I never said that. And yeah, this kind of like what I heard might have been a little bit more subjective to like, my experience at that time. Might not be the way that, Codesmith is doing it right now, but it's kind of like, I guess, like you said, it's kind of like a pattern that people have noticed. So I don't want to like end it on a down note, but I do want to say that like, I feel like still the skills that like you are learning at Codesmith, and the ones that kind of like, if you're in the program are, picking up at that time, will definitely help prepare you for a job. You don't really need to try to present yourself as something that you're not, basically. Because I think like I was just saying with my friend who, just graduated with me, got a job at like a pretty big company, was like very upfront about the fact that she attended Codesmith. And yeah, just like, this is my experience. And then she passed the onsite and got the job.
Yeah, and it's a hard, like you said, I know you don't want to end it on this negative note, and I think you ended it on a positive one. And I think you're really pushing what I'm also getting at is there's a lot of desperation being pushed because of the pandemic. Pandemic's like a big thing, and it's negatively affected every single coding bootcamp. And so it's interesting seeing the market change and how coding bootcamps are advertising. But more importantly, like, trust in your skills. There are, I can tell you, people coming out of Codesmith. There are a lot of people that graduate coding boot camps and they don't even do half of what they could to be so much more competitive than other people. Like if you looked at people's day-to-day, because I mentor people one-on-one all week long, and if you looked at people's day-to-day, they are not doing half of what they even claim that they're doing. And so the message there is like, even if Codesmith had this, like all these holes in their curriculum, which I've reviewed coding boot camps where they just did not, you had to supplement a lot. You could still supplement that. Like even if it got you 90% of the way there, you supplement it and you could still be extremely competitive. And really maybe the message is be confident in your skills. Like, because that integrity, man, once you lose someone's trust or like you lie in the industry and that gets out there, people think like, oh, no one's ever going to know. And you could just taint. I would focus more on like creating a healthy conversation with a person, like relating to them, learning how to interview, learning how to have fun and be constructive in an interview, and like be that person that they want to code with, versus you trying to like lie or not be 100% honest about your skills. Those are two very, I wouldn't even say different types of developers. Those are two different types of people. So it's really just encouraging people to have confidence in their skills. But yeah, no, you had a lot of good things to say about Codesmith, but I'm glad we had this conversation because people should be aware of it. So
definitely.
So we definitely went over like a couple minutes, and it was just you this time. Usually it's 3 people and we don't even go over, but you gave a lot of good feedback and just shared a lot about your experience. I think people are really going to love this video. So real quick, I know you have Z. Can I say your name on stream?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I think I think that was from like another call where I just like, no, you just, say my name. That's fine.
Okay. So Zach, I really appreciate coming on. This is a good experience. Stick around for a couple minutes after this, after I end the recording. But seriously, thanks so much for sharing all this. This was good. I'm telling you, so many people, they wanted this Codesmith video. Like it was hard to find alumni. I appreciate you coming on. This was awesome. And I know a lot of people are going to appreciate this. But before I let you go, if people want to reach out to you, where could they reach you?
Yeah. I was going to say, I mean, if anyone like after, watching or listening to this had any further like follow-up questions, I think the best place, you can just like reach out to me on LinkedIn. Message me there. I've over the last like year or so, I've tried to like limit my use of social media, but LinkedIn is like the one that I keep checking. I guess that's probably the best way to reach out. I do have like a personal site that I've tried to start like basically turn into like a blog. But that's still something that's in progress. I guess like most engineers, I have like 4 like side projects in my head at once. So I guess for now, the one like for sure thing I could say is reach out to me on LinkedIn if you have any questions. Okay.
Very cool. Do you want my audience to hold you accountable for writing blog posts?
I could definitely appreciate that.
Okay. What's your personal site?
So it's haluza.dev. So that's my last name, HALUZA.dev.
What do you talk about there?
So right now I think I only have about like 4 posts. I do have like a separate branch where I'm trying to like basically recreate kind of like a almost like the bootcamp experience. So I guess I'm telling more so people can hold me even more accountable, but where I want to like just provide resources, kind of like going through a lot of the fundamentals, heavily inspired by the Codesmith curriculum, but the articles that I have now, it's like some that are a little more fundamental. I have one that's like an ground up introduction to Redux, one that's like a little bit more on the, I guess, like intermediate side, where it's like, say, using Docker to spin up a database like locally. So it's more of a small mini project. And yeah, my goal now is just to like start coming up with more content and then like organize it later.
I love it. All right. Well, everyone, you have his website, especially if he's talking about Redux. That's a really tricky thing to learn. Go subscribe to his blog, hold him accountable, tell him some of the topics that you want him to talk about. So yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, Zach. It was a pleasure. I appreciate you having on. Yeah, thanks for joining us with this. Yeah,
no, thanks. And thanks for having me on. It's been a lot of fun talking about this.
Awesome.